So your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, etc., etc. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed. You didn't pay attention?
Let's be honest, the Democratic Party just took a serious hit. And here's the twist. It didn't come from conservative critics, but from two unexpected voices, Bill Maher and Stephen A. Smith. Yes, you heard that right. On Maher's Club Random podcast, the outspoken comedian and the fiery ESPN analyst sat down for a conversation that quickly turned into fireworks. With no filters, no polished PR talk, and no sugarcoating, both men tore into what they see as the modern Democratic Party, a movement they described as arrogant, disconnected, and trapped in its own echo chamber. Maher, a lifelong liberal, sounded like someone who just realized his house was burning, and the people he trusted to save it were actually the ones holding the matches. Stephen A. didn't hold back either, ripping into the DNC's overconfidence, weak strategy, and obsession with identity politics instead of genuine progress. The man came with receipts, and he didn't miss. So, what made this exchange so powerful, and could it finally be the wake-up call Democrats desperately need? Maher kicked things off bluntly. I'm pissed. No jokes, no filters, just raw frustration. He lamented that his biggest priorities, democracy and the environment, have lost serious ground because, in his view, Democrats fumbled the ball. Even with his growing disillusionment, Maher hasn't abandoned his principles. He still stands firmly for democracy, civil rights, and protecting the planet. But what's clear is that he's running out of patience with the party that once claimed to stand for those very ideals.
Because my point at the end of this thing, Friday, is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues,
Which is?
democracy and the environment. It's my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
Okay.
In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them. So I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me unguarded.
Think back to when Kamala Harris's media team practically was 60 Minutes. Her interviews were polished to perfection, carefully edited and framed to make her seem calm, capable, and presidential, more like a campaign commercial than journalism. But now, reality is catching up, and Maher isn't thrilled about it. Let's be real. You can't cry democracy is under threat just because your own side is finally being challenged and held accountable. Stephen A., though, didn't bother tiptoeing around the issue. He went straight for the jugular. His main complaint? Pure, unfiltered arrogance. The kind that's eaten away at the Democratic Party from the inside out.
Generally speaking, we can talk to the economy, immigration, crime in the streets, blah, blah, blah. Here's my ultimate issue. The arrogance of the Democratic Party.
I'm saying the same thing.
The arrogance, I mean, we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The arrogance of the second Democratic Party. So, Biden doesn't decide to run for re-election. You grease the skid so he doesn't have to go through a primary. June 27th, he shows up and he embarrasses himself. And it positions naturally for the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, to ultimately ascend and become the Democratic nominee. But the last time we saw her in a primary, she couldn't make it to Iowa. Did you really think that was going to work?
Biden's decision to run again was a misstep, and deep down, everyone saw it coming. The signs were plastered everywhere, lack of enthusiasm, sinking approval ratings, and a nation clearly craving new leadership. So what did the DNC do? Instead of listening, they shut down the competition. They cleared the path, silenced challengers, and made sure Biden coasted through without facing a real primary fight. And when Kamala Harris's campaign eventually stumbled, the nomination was handed to him as if it were some royal inheritance. Now it's her turn. No rivals, no debates, No genuine discussion. Then came the question Stephen A. Smith had the courage to ask, the one everyone else was too afraid to voice. Did they honestly think that strategy would work? Did party leaders really believe that telling voters to forget about inflation, crime, and immigration and to focus solely on Roe v. Wade would be enough? Did they truly think calling black men misogynistic would convince them to rally behind Kamala Harris? That's just one snapshot of a larger issue, a party splintering under its own arrogance. The Democrats assumed they could program voters like machines with the right buzzwords and slogans, but people are far more perceptive than that. You can't win hearts with lectures. You win them by earning trust and votes through genuine results.
No, the Republicans don't play that. They say, hell with all of that, whose turn it is. We want him. Who do the Democrats want? If you ask them today, they still don't know. They said Kamala because it was too late to say anybody else. But you didn't know who they would say if there was a primary.
And also because the Democratic Party is ideologically captured by identity politics.
And I'm totally with you 1,000%. Listen.
He reminded everyone that during Obama's presidency, deportations reached a record high. Obama signed the legislation into law. He understood that national security and border control are not racist talking points. These are the state's basic responsibilities. A few years later, though, the same party that had called Obama the de-order commander suddenly decided to abolish ICE. The reason is optics. Being empathetic was more important than being helpful. Not because they had a better plan, but because it made them feel better. They shifted their focus from following the law to opening the borders.
Then here's what you did. Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border because unlike Obama, who was quote unquote the deporter in chiefs, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did.
According to not just Republicans, but the Democrats. There were Democrats who called him.
He deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk about it, but he did.
Everyone knew that so-called sanctuary cities would end up being the landing spots for incoming migrants. And sure enough, when that happened, panic spread among city mayors. The same leaders who once preached compassion suddenly began pleading, please stop sending people here. That right there is the issue. Even when Democrats talk about empathy, they rarely prepare for the real-world consequences of their policies. Both Maher and Stephen A. were driving home the same point. This isn't about genuine compassion, it's about performance. You're expected to act like you care, at least until the cameras turn off. Meanwhile, while Democrats were busy putting on a moral show, they lost sight of what truly matters to everyday Americans: the economy, public safety, border control, and national security. Instead of addressing those pressing issues, they told women, forget about the economy, just vote to protect abortion rights. They told black men, if you're not backing Kamala, you must be sexist. And to Latino voters, they said, support us because we care about immigration. But as Stephen A. wisely reminded them, Latinos aren't a single uniform group. Cubans, Dominicans, Venezuelans, Colombians, each community carries its own history, experiences, and views on the border. Many actually support stricter border policies because they followed the legal process and value order. The DNC's biggest mistake? Assuming they could lump everyone together under the same slogans. That arrogance didn't just alienate voters, it cost them support from the very people they claim to understand.
Biden walks in the office and day one you sign an executive order that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally, and you don't think that's going to be a problem? You knew that the governors DeSantis in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and others were going to sit up there and attack sanctuary cities while busing these immigrants to your city since you had no problem with it. You were ill prepared to deal with it, okay? All of this stuff was...
And that's where the whole Democratic strategy fails. Then they stopped listening. Instead of telling voters what they needed, they told them what they should care about. They concentrated their energies on ideas rather than solutions. Furthermore, it is not a good idea to win an election or run for office by talking down to others. On the other hand, the Democrats viewed Kamala Harris's campaign as a coronation. It's her time now, but nobody could explain why it was her turn. No sensible financial plan, blurry vision, only a string of slogans about tearing down walls. That isn't leadership. Public relations is the issue.
So your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, You're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris. You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, etc., etc. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
You have to win their support, and the Democrats completely forgot about that. Ma went on to say, the arrogance of the Democratic Party. And he's right. They have become philosophically enmeshed in identity politics. The party of ideas is no longer them. Their party is the checkbox. A very clear point was presently made by Stephen A. He does not speak on conservative issues. He made it clear that he is a financial conservative, but a social liberal. He supports transsexual rights, LGBT rights, and equal protection under the law. He has no hatred for anyone. But here's the important part. He said the Democrats went too far.
And pay attention to that. You're from California. You were a district attorney here. You were a state attorney general here. You were a senator representing here. And you didn't know that the Latinos were going to say, yo, we don't like open borders. You didn't know that?
Yeah,
And so I'm looking at it and I'm saying all of these things are going on. All of these things are going on. And your argument essentially was, you didn't say it, but this is essentially your argument. It's her turn. It's her turn.
Standing up for equal rights shouldn't mean abandoning common sense. The goal isn't to force people to celebrate ideas they don't agree with. It's to allow everyone to live freely without demanding total conformity. But today, the message often sounds more like, either you agree with me or you're the problem. That kind of thinking is driving ordinary Americans away from the left. Most people don't harbor hatred. They just don't want to be branded as prejudiced for holding opinions that differ from the most extreme views. When the DNC pushes policies such as taxpayer-funded gender surgeries for inmates or medical transitions for minors, many voters see that not as progress, but as a step too far. Compassion doesn't have to come at the cost of reason. Both Maher and Stephen A. understand this. They're not attacking transgender individuals. They're questioning the logic behind policies that blur biological and ethical boundaries in the name of inclusion. A society can't stay stable when its leaders ignore that balance. Everyday Americans are the ones working hard, supporting families, and trying to live peacefully can see the disconnect. And that gap between political rhetoric and real-world priorities is exactly what's pushing them to look elsewhere for leadership.
I'm a big Bill, just so you know. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. Live and let live, bro.
And a freak in the sheet.
Yes,
If you're 50,
I do try.
give us a call.
I do try, no doubt. But here's the deal, man. Listen, I'm a social liberal. And what I mean by that is gay rights, absolutely. Transgender rights and all that stuff. I got no issues with you. I don't want anybody. I'm a black man. I don't want anybody's civil rights violated. I don't want anybody being persecuted in the streets of America. I don't want you being mistreated. I don't want you being denied the same rights that I have. That's fine. But the Democrats took it too far. It wasn't just about their rights. You wanted folks to like and embrace and accept everything. Excuse me. There are some people that, guess what? They might watch prostitution, but they ain't they might like porn stars, but they ain't messing with them. They might like strippers, but they ain't messing. It's all right. Yup. Do you? But I don't want it in my face. You got people that think like that, and knowing that that's the reality, and knowing that that doesn't even make up 1% of the population, you are caught on tape, if you're Kamala Harris, saying, quote, I'm for transgender operations for prisoners.
At the end of the day, that's what this whole conversation between Maher and Stephen A. exposed.
I'm just saying, like, this is why I say, I voted for Kamala Harris, but I can't deny that strictly from a campaign perspective, Bill, he was a better candidate because he played to his constituents.
In their defense, they had a meeting and they decided that free for murderers was a good slogan.
Okay. And where did that get them? Because in the end, when you try to pay your bills,
okay, but here's the
and you got peace in the streets that you worried about, you're not going for that.
Here's the silver lining.
You're trying to win.
I think the election showed we're much less racially tribal than we thought we were. I mean, Trump is a strange guy to bring together all these different coalitions, but, you know, he like won Latino men.
13%.
13?
They said it was a 13% jump.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever
Latino
it was.
votes and a 5% jump in the black vote, and even more of that amongst black.
If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you agree with Stephen A. Smith and Bill Maher's take, or do you feel they crossed the line? Let's start the conversation. I'd love to hear your perspective. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.